Hey everyone, and welcome to the College Chaps podcast. Well, it might be a new year, but the old season is winding down to its conclusion. So, in this episode, we will talk about the national championship final between the Ohio State Buckeyes and those Notre Dame Fighting Irish. But first, we're the Chaps, and I'm joined by Ollie and Alex. How are you both?
Yeah, it's what is it? Thursday we're recording this week, and it's less than 4 days, is it? I can't even think what time of day it is or what time of the week it is. Anything.
Give or
Yeah,
take, give or take. I think you're in the ballpark.
time matters not when you've got what I think is going to be a really enthralling and intriguing national championship game. To look forward to on Monday night.
Those are the kind of words that people use about games that end 9-7.
They're my sort of games. That's suggested as a walk-off field goal win there, which is why I far preferred the Orange Bowl to the Cotton Bowl.
What are you? You're not thinking touchdown, touchdown, safety, walk off, win. I expected more of you, Mister
Safety,
Hutchinson.
safety walk off win, that'd be something.
I will remind you that predictions are the last thing that we're going to be talking about. We seem to just jump to the very end of the
Well,
script
it was a great episode anyway.
straight away. Oh, it was a great episode. I'd be delighted with a walk-off field goal. That suggests it's going to be a close game. Alex, how are you?
I'm great. I'm eating my dinner,
Yeah.
which I'm trying not to let go over the microphone as much as possible, but um, busy. It's a busy time of year for us. We are about a week away from probably our biggest game of the season. So, working really hard to get better, to grow, to try and join one of Notre Dame and Ohio State in winning a national championship this year.
Yes. Yes, indeed. And if you are watching this on YouTube, you have the joy of watching Alex eating his chicken and rice. But that's not what we're here to. That's what our next episode might be about, but that's not what this episode's about. We're here to talk about a national championship game, and I wanted to start with Ohio State because, in many ways, they've been the story all season, whether they liked it or not. This team has been under a huge amount of pressure and duress from the get-go, most, if not all, of their own doing. So, my first question to you guys is that are they now exonerated in terms of what they've achieved this year? Ryan Day off the hook. Is Ohio State off the hook in terms of they've delivered or they've got to where they wanted to be, or do they need to win it for Ryan Day to? I'm not suggesting he gets fired if he doesn't, but is the monkey off his back if he doesn't win it?
It's an interesting one because if you look back over the season, it's um it's that one game against Michigan and his failure to win that game consistently, which really brought all the question marks about Ryan Davis. I don't think anyone thought ill of Ohio State because they lost to Oregon in the regular season. Because I think for most people, Oregon were in the mix as a preseason favorite to win everything. And let's not forget they're the only undefeated regular season team in college football. Oregon were so that defeat to Oregon. I don't think really had any bearing on what people think of Ohio State and of Ryan Day. It was very much the Michigan defeat, which brings it around to does Ryan Day have a big game problem? Well, he's had to win 3 games to get to this biggest of games, the biggest of all the games. And if they're losing against Notre Dame, then obviously that comes back around to does Ryan Day have a big game problem the same way we talk about James Franklin year in, year out? We're probably still going to talk about James Franklin after the defeat in the Orange Bowl, but that's by the by. So I think it feels very much like there's been. I don't think there's a Ryan Day on the hook question at Ohio State at all. I think there is a national narrative about Ryan Day that everyone I think gets sucked into because of the Michigan game, and maybe they didn't look as convincing as they might have been and looked and should have looked against national perception through the season. But hey, they've looked awesome when it's mattered the most in these last 3 games. Um, So yeah, I kind of think that's where we're at, where we should be at with Ryan Day. But Alex will come in and tell me why
Well,
I'm wrong.
just before Alex jumps in, can I just be devil's advocate for a second? If Notre Dame win the national championship, does that loss to Oregon look quite as appeasing as you've just said it is? Because you then you got an Ohio State team that's got three losses on its record, and Oregon won nothing this year, right? So,
Well, I mean, they won the Big Ten, so I won't say they won nothing.
no. Well,
Just because you as a fan of the SEC discredits the Big
no, no,
Ten,
no,
George,
no.
doesn't mean
We
we
don't.
should.
No, no, not to want to argue the point. We don't include conference championships any longer, right? It's all about the playoffs. So, in
Well, I
effect,
do.
Oregon have won nothing, right?
I think a conference championship means, as we've discussed on this podcast, a conference championship means that what it should mean, and it's a trophy in the cabinet at the end of the day, and it should mean something. Um, but yeah, I think you know, bigger question is, can he win a big game if they lose to Notre Dame? Because then is what's Ohio State's resume if they lose to Notre Dame? They've lost to the national champions, they've lost to the Big Ten champions, and they lost to the ReliaQuest Bowl champions.
I
Still three defeats.
I'm gonna come in and give some insight here. I think he's kicked the can down the road by the way they've played the last three games or last two games, whatever it is. Um, I think that Ohio State, I think he's bought himself at least 7 months. They got the rematch against Texas to open up the 2025 schedule. Um, that's at home. They have to win that game, right? Game one of next season. But I also think that maybe he's bought himself 11 months or 10 months, whatever it is, until November 29th, 2025, when they go into Michigan Stadium, they go into the big house and they face the Wolverines. Because I think if he doesn't win this game, then he's still on a semi-warm seat, right? If they lose this game, they lose to Texas and they lose to Michigan next year, he's gone, right? I think. Um, they don't have an awful schedule next year. They avoid Oregon next year. They've got to play Penn State like they always do, but that's at home as well. So, like looking ahead, I think he's bought himself enough time to kind of get through 2025 at least. But I think if he wins it, then he's safe for a long time, right? Winning a national championship at Ohio State will keep you, or will keep the fans on your side for a long time to come. So I do think it's important for Ryan Day. I think he's somewhat rehabbed his image now by getting them to this point, but no one really remembers the team that lost the national championship game. You remember who won it, and I think fans remember winning. They don't remember getting there anywhere near as fondly. So yeah, I do think it's important that they win this one.
Well, let me jump ahead a little bit then, because I think I really like this question, which is of the two coaches in the national championship game, which one do you think is most likely still to be in the same job in 3 years' time, and will they have won multiple national championships? Because I like that question.
I don't think it's Marcus Freeman. I think he's NFL bound in the next couple of years. The image, the way he speaks, how well he speaks, like that's just got some NFL owners going to fall in love with that guy and pay him whatever he wants to move up to the pros. I think he's got that kind of package around him of NFL future NFL head coach, which I think is. I don't think Ryan Day has that. I think he is a college guy. He's just got college football written all over him, and I think he could end up being at Ohio State in 3 years' time quite easily still. Even without winning a Natty. Like I think he could still be there in 3 years. That winning a national championship one program does that. You could still have a healthy program. colleges don't fire, they won't fire now as we go towards the revenue sharing model quite as easily, right? Because you fire a coach, you don't have as much money to pay players in the same way. So that's another big thing that's coming forward. But I do think Marcus Freeman will end up in the NFL in the next 3 years.
Yeah,
Well, you're nodding your head.
I don't disagree with anything that Alex just said. I think for Marcus Freeman as well, like you win a you win one championship with Notre Dame, like you that's where else are you taking that program? Like you're not likely to create a Nick Saban-esque dynasty at Notre Dame. I don't feel like, and I might be wrong in that because he's the sort of guy that if you were going to put your mortgage on creating a sustained winning culture, it would probably be Marcus Freeman in this modern era of college football. But I feel like to have that sustained, consistent, like winning an Natty every year with Notre Dame would be difficult. And he's still so young. He's going to have he's going to have whatever he wants at his feet whenever he wants it. I feel like he's got that. Like Alex said, the guy exudes culture, he exudes class, he exudes intelligence. Like, in all honesty, the greatest thing I've seen I've seen it written today, and I thought, or yesterday, and I was like, this is the biggest endorsement that you can have of Marcus Freeman. He's made Notre Dame nationally and internationally likable. Like that might be the biggest gift he's given to that program. And how long are you going to ride that wave? In all
Right.
honesty,
Yeah, there's a world where they win on Monday night and he's not the head coach of the Notre Dame Fighting Irish on the 1st of Feb. I can absolutely see that happening. I can
Well,
abs
we know Chicago are interested. The Bears are interested, right? And they won't be the only NFL team that's mooching about, right?
like and coaching it isn't that there's no sentiment in coaching that there's no loyalty. The only loyalty you have is to yourself. If you're Marcus Freeman, if that opportunity comes and it's going to change your life to do it, and you get that chance to go and it's the right fit. I don't think Chicago is the right fit for him. I think there are other potential jobs. The Dallas Cowboys job coming up. If anyone gets asked to go and coach the Cowboys in the world of football, you're probably saying yes, right? It's probably the biggest job in sport, let alone in football. They're definitely up there as the biggest brand or one of the biggest brands in sport. So I think there's a world where Marcus Freeman is gone this year if they win. Because like Ollie said, it's similar to Jim Harbaugh at Michigan last year. Like, are you going to create a dynasty with Notre Dame? I don't think there's going to be a dynasty in the next 10, 15, 20 years of college football. I think the playing field is too level with the transfer portal, with NIL, with multiple schools being able to compete. I think we've seen that the last 2 years, the lack of SEC dominance in the last 2 years of this national championship game. That there's not been an SEC team in the national championship game the last 2 years. And I think that's, it shows because you can't stack three talented players at every position anymore because they'll go elsewhere and they'll get money and playing time elsewhere. So I think there's a real lack of conditions around a dynasty, and I don't think that you can build it. So I think these guys that have success are looking elsewhere, and they're looking for the big payday that is the NFL.
Well, I get there's a couple of things there in that we're going to go on and talk about Chip Kelly, right? So I think there's a warning flag or some history in there that demonstrates that all that glitters isn't gold, right? Maybe a relative. I don't know. I imagine John Harbaugh will be tenured where he is, but I think he might be the exception rather than the rule. Uh, not wanting to jump on the Notre Dame bandwagon, but there's two things that strike me. One is I think Marcus Freeman is trying to build a culture there, which wasn't there before. By even getting to the national championship, he's done arguably more than Brian Kelly did during his time. But I think winning a national championship, if they do, it will be the same for Ryan Day. But I think to a lesser extent, it puts Marcus Freeman into the history books at Notre Dame, right? Now obviously, Ohio State will be the same, but I just don't think it will have the same impact. I think Marcus Freeman then becomes legendary, almost like Kirby Smart at Georgia, becomes that legendary head coach that got them back to a national championship. So I'm not so sure. He also strikes me as an incredibly intelligent man, and I'm not so sure that he jumps for the gold at the NFL at the first time of asking, because I think, Alex, you're entirely correct. It's about the right fit. And I would suggest neither the Bears or the Cowboys is the right fit. I want to talk about Chip Kelly just before we move on, because I listened into his press conference and he talked incredibly well. And then I started looking back at kind of what Chip's done in his career, because for me, I just remember that truly fantastic Oregon team who sadly didn't win a national championship, right? So just before we move on to the game itself, does Chip Kelly's resume deserve a national championship? And when he hangs up his clipboard, will we look back on him as a lesser coach because he hasn't won a national championship?
Coaches don't win championships, teams do. Like I think the way we look at coaches is wrong, and I include myself in that as well. Like I'm not infallible. Um, Chip Kelly came in and changed the game, right? And he produced and helped to mastermind one of the most exciting and fun offenses to watch that we've seen in a long time. One of the most fun and exciting teams to watch that we've seen in a long time. But I look outside of that one team and I say, where's the other success really in there? I don't think he's a pinnacle guy. I don't think he's a top 10 kind of college football coach, personally. Like, he's fun. He did something fun, but what really separates him from Mike Leach, outside of Mike Leach being funnier in press conferences, right? And arguably, Mike Leach having more success over a period trying to play a similar style. So, for me, I think if that Oregon team had won a national championship, it would have been great. It would have been a great story. I don't think it changes too much about Chip Kelly. Great coaches have success for an extended period of time. You compare Chip Kelly and Ed Orgeron, right? I think they're kind of on a similar level. Obviously, Ed Orgeron's LSU team won that championship. Chip Kelly's team didn't, but I don't rank either of them as like top tier college football coaches.
Well, so let me phrase this slightly differently, Ollie. Um, we saw the those who were voted into the College Football Hall of Fame this week. Nick Saban has gone in at the first time of asking. There's still, I think, an acceptable and understandable amount of noise about Mike Leach not getting in because of his win record. Um, would Chip Kelly get into the College Football Hall of Fame when he retires?
Excuse me. I'm not sure what you would hang like an argument for Chip Kelly's inclusion in the Hall of Fame on. Like when you enter into those discussions, and someone obviously this year it was a slam dunk for Nick Saban. Like there was no way in hell that you could make any argument, but most of the time when the College Football Hall of Fame, same as the Pro Football Hall of Fame, comes around, there's a character or two with some contention, and it brings up those passionate conversations about who should be in and who shouldn't be in. And obviously, when it came to the time, it would be who was Chip Kelly up against. But I don't think there's as Alex said, he changed the game in a lot of respects. But like, what's his crowning glory? What's his sustained success for inclusion into the College Football Hall of Fame? And I'll say this: I was going to tag on to the end of what Alex was saying. Like, quietly, Ohio State has been a very different offense this year, and the influence of Chip Kelly is kind of clearly been felt, especially as the playoffs where they've steamrolled teams. But the rest of the season has been pretty quiet. But they've got a legitimate top scoring offense in the country this year, which was the real knock on Ohio State last year. Was like the offense was just mediocre for an Ohio State Buckeyes offense, and Kyle McCord took a lot of the slack for that. And you saw how well he did at Syracuse. So there is something to be said about the influence that Chip Kelly's had on this Ohio State Buckeyes team, for sure. I think what we're going to discuss as we go into the prediction of what's going to happen in this game is if there's a coordinator at Ohio State who should be talked about in terms of reverence and the College Football Hall of Fame, it's defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. Because that has been, for the past 2 or 3 seasons, has been the hallmark of Buckeyes' success, is what they've been able to do on the defensive side of the ball since Jim Knowles came in. Night and day from those Ohio State teams that we talked about, as like the defense was a liability at times. Like Jim Knowles has completely changed that team around and that unit around, and that's a guy who I don't think gets enough credit for the job that he's done with this Ohio State team. Just as an aside, you didn't ask me about Jim Knowles, but there we go.
Going back, sorry, one last quick little point. Coming back to our Ryan Day chat from earlier in the podcast, I think that's one massive tick in his box. He's brought in 2 experienced guys as coordinators, and they've had big successes in adjusting and changing what Ohio State do. And if you're a good college football coach, like if you're a good recruiter, it takes balls to get 2 solid minds, one offensive, one defensive, and say, go run my offense and my defense. I'll manage things. I'll be the CEO. But on game day, you run the offense, you run the defense, you run the special teams. And I think Ryan Day's done that really well. And that's kind of the modern way of doing things in college football, right? The head coach is the CEO, he recruits, he manages the program. But you know, if you can bring in 2 really experienced guys, one great on offense, one great on defense, you're in a really good spot and you can build something really special.
Well, not for this podcast, but it'll be interesting next year how what we see from Dabo Swinney, right? Because Tom Allen strikes me as one of those types of hires. But going back to the point about Chip Kelly in Oregon and College Football Hall of Fame, I'm not advocating, but he brought that team to national relevance, and arguably Dan Lanning wouldn't have the program he's got just now without Chip Kelly, because they won a Pac-10 championships. Was it Pac-10, Pac-12 championships that they weren't doing before. He took them to 4 national BCS bowl games, which they hadn't really done before. I think, he changed the face of that program. Now, whether that's enough to get him in the College Football Hall of Fame, I don't know. We've talked very little about the game itself. I haven't looked at the odds recently, but I'm still of the opinion Iowa State remain the favourites. Ollie, what do the Irish have to do to win this game? What are the keys to an Irish victory?
We've talked about Oregon, Ohio State already, but I think when you look at that game, there is something about that regular season game that Notre Dame kind of has to hang the hat on, and it's turnovers. Like they've got to force turnovers. That's going to be the key for the game. Notre Dame, they're going to try and thrive on the ground. They're going to try and thrive with Jeremiah Love, who's not 100%. They're going to try and thrive with Jadarian Price and use Riley Leonard as his showcase that he's capable of on the ground with his legs. Ohio State is an incredibly difficult team to get your ground game going on. and even Oregon found that. They especially found that um, in the Rose Bowl, but even in the regular season, it was kind of what Dylan Gabriel could do with his arm that gave Oregon that win over Ohio State in the regular season. I don't think that Riley Leonard can do that the same way that Dylan Gabriel can. So I don't think I don't think Notre Dame can go toe to toe offensively. They're both great defenses. Ohio State's got an offensive advantage. But I think Notre Dame is very, very, very capable of making things extremely difficult. They're very good at forcing turnovers, special teams, as we've seen, in the last couple of games, let alone like the rest of the season, has been really good. They're going to have to be on their A game in every facet of the game at the end of the day. But I do think that ability to force turnovers can give Ohio State some difficulties.
Yeah, I agree with you. They have to force turnovers because if Ohio State go up and down the field and score, if Ohio State scores 20, they win the Natty for me in this one. I don't see how Notre Dame can score big points on this Ohio State defense. I just don't, if I don't rate this Notre Dame offense as high as the Texas offense that Ohio State shut down 10 days ago or whatever it was, maybe not quite a week ago at this point. Like, I don't think they're as good. I think the Notre Dame defense is phenomenal. And I think that they have the option if they can get short field position, if they can get some turnovers, if they can get extra possessions in there. Yes, there's the potential that they break something big and they score, or they just grind this Ohio State team down and score late. I think there's options there. I do think that for me, I think Ohio State should be favourites in this game. I think they've got the better offense, um, and I think they'll be able to score on this Notre Dame defense. It's going to be a bit boom or bust for Notre Dame, and maybe that's some of the beauty of this kind of game, right? It's one and done. There's no point playing to grow for the future. You play for now, and they can take some risks, they can take some chances and chase some turnovers and try and win that way.
It's a great point. It's a great point, actually. You mentioned a particular number there, which I think is absolutely pivotal, critical, whatever word you want to use. 20. There's only one team in college football this season who's put up 20 points on Ohio State, and that's Oregon. And Oregon did it twice. They won once. They lost once. If Ohio State gets 20, I think that's game over. I think that's a great point. I don't think Notre Dame gets beyond 20 points.
Cheers, buddy. Cheers.
You're welcome, mate. You're absolutely welcome. As soon as you got that mullet, it's just everything's fell into place for you, man. And I come in more chuffed for you.
It's a brain food they've been having. What's nice about these two teams are these are two teams which have grown throughout the season and have improved game on game, and I think that is always exciting. We talked about this last week when we were talking about kind of tournament play. Ollie, just quickly before we go to predictions, because I'm determined we're going to finish on time tonight. Injuries to that Notre Dame offensive line again, right? So they've already plugged the gap once because it's not their starting left tackle, I think, is who was injured. They've got another injury. Do they have enough? I mean, that's a lot to ask somebody to come in who effectively would have been third choice at the start of the season. Do they have enough to be able to cope with that in the national championship game? Do you know?
Interestingly enough, was it last week or the week before? I can't remember which podcast it was. And we talked about the national championship and who was going to win it. And I got Texas, Ohio State, all manners are wrong. I thought Texas would have enough to win it. But we said, and I said on that podcast, battle of attrition. And so it comes to pass that Notre Dame comes into this national championship game really on the rough end of the battle of attrition. I thought the loss of Anthonie Knappe is huge. Like that kid is a freshman, kind of freshman All-American tackle for us at College Football Network with how he's played this year. He's been incredible, and I think you noticed against Penn State when Tosh Baker came in and played the second half at left, or most, all the second half, a little bit of the first. There was a noticeable difference. I think Tosh Baker got he learned some stuff, and Abdul Carter was not fully fit against Notre Dame, and he had his way with the Notre Dame offensive line a lot more than they would have liked. So it's going to be tough. They haven't actually designated a starter. Tosh Baker is there in bold type on the depth chart, but with that ever ominous or next to his name. So that's gonna, whatever way Marcus Freeman paints it, whatever way offensive line coach or offensive coordinator paints it, there's obviously some concern there about the five that they try out. Now, when you've got a guy like Pat Coogan at the center who is, if you've not seen Pat Coogan's viral hype up videos where he swears a lot more than Alex Ginnery does on this podcast, go and find them as soon as you listen to this, because that guy's influence on the center of our Notre Dame offensive line is critical. One of the starting guard, there was a question mark over his fitness. He's going to play, so that's huge. We'll see. We'll see. Notre Dame have batted injuries all over the park all through this run to the college football playoff national championship. So if there was a team you're going to hang your hat on, there being enough unity, enough cohesion, enough ability to overcome the obstacles and the adversity, you'd say it's probably them. But that's a damn good defensive line that they're going up against on Monday night.
That leads us nicely to our predictions. So where are we going to start, Alex? Who do you fancy on? Are you going to have a stab at a score?
I thought last week would be close. It really wasn't. I think Ohio State's the best team in college football right now. I have them winning by 10.
Ollie?
No, George, you go.
Well, I was going to. I've got a feeling that it's going to be a clean sweep, so I thought I'd go with the Irish in a massive upset, which does actually put Jason Day's jacket on a shaky peg. I just don't know. I just get this feeling about the Irish. There's something about them this year. I didn't feel it for 80% of the season, but as soon as they got into the playoffs, they've just looked like from my perspective, a different team. So I hope it is a really tight game. I hope it is a walk-off field goal that wins it for them. Maybe it's heart over head. But yeah, the Irish by a few points, a couple, three maybe at max. Building up to crescendo now. Ollie's clearly got something.
I really wish I'd not said, go on, you go first, George, because I didn't think I'd be like have this deciding vote on what the college chaps think is going to happen in the college football national championship. I honestly don't know. I'm going to go with my heart over my head, because I said it in the last week's show. I think there's something very special happening at Notre Dame, and I want to believe in something special. I think that's, we've talked about it on this podcast before. Like, college football is special. College football deserves to be covered in glory 100% of the time. The stories deserve to be told, and people get to deserve and enjoy what this sport is. And for a story, I think there's great storylines whoever wins, but I feel like storyline of Notre Dame winning this national championship would be just such a great storyline for college football.
In what has been a
great season,
incredible season, right?
Yeah,
now,
sure.
At the start of the season, we're having this conversation. We said Ohio State are going to be champions. We're like, right, okay. I mean, they were probably they were certainly in that cluster of teams that we would have had there but Notre Dame wouldn't have been there wrongly.
Not on this show.
Not on this show. So I think in this year of an incredible football season, and that we shouldn't get lost in all the kind of hoo-ha, it would be appropriate for an Irish win. So
I tell you something as well. I don't want to. I know we want to finish on time, but we haven't. So we're going to draw it out a bit longer anyway. in this modern era of college football, like we talked about it before the season, and Ohio State they played the off season perfectly for the modern era of college football. Everything they did with NIL, everything they did with the transfer portal, everything they can do with recruiting, because they do recruit at such a high level. Like they retained, they kept guys who should have gone to the NFL draft because they could afford to keep them there. They played the off season perfectly for modern era college football. There would be something just poetic about a team like Notre Dame winning the college football national championship, who doesn't traditionally, do some of those things as well, like because of the traditions, because of the academic standards, because of everything that Notre Dame is. Like there'd almost be a poetry for the stuck in the mud college football fans to go, hey, like we don't need all that. And I know Notre Dame, Riley Leonard was one of the most coveted quarterbacks in the transfer portal. You can't get away from that, that element of it, that fact, kind of taints my storyline, my poetic storyline somewhat, but I still think there's something to it, honestly. I just think it's pretty cool.
But in some way, this is a conversation for another time, right? Because the really interesting article by Dennis Dodd and John Talty in CBS today about the now perceived dominance of Big Ten going forward because of money, right? And that we could fill a whole episode with that. So in many ways, Notre Dame and teams of that ilk are fighting with one hand tied behind their back, right? Because Stanford's another good example of that. But I say that's a conversation for another time. Let's hope that we have Bobby Dazzler of a championship game on Monday, and when we meet up again next week, we're raving about what a fantastic game it was, and it was fitting into an incredible football season. That's all from us on this episode. If you're a new listener, now's an opportune time to point out the other 202 episodes that you can find on Apple Podcasts. If you're a regular listener, thank you. We love you. And if you like what you heard, please rate, review, and subscribe. You can also follow us on X and Instagram. Our social media accounts are at College Chaps and the College Chaps podcast on YouTube. So please give us a follow. Thank you. It's not quite the end of our year, but thank you for an incredible year of insight from both Ollie and Alex. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and well, and catch you all next time.